again, movie lovers, and hey, Leia, how are you?
I feel a little lost today, Brennan.
That makes sense. I understand exactly why. Things don't look standard around here, right? You know I like a good theme.
Yeah.
With the movie we're talking about, I figured with this, what can I do to kind of splash things up a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So I figured, hey, a maze. Perfectly on topic.
How many rock stars did you drink to accomplish this?
I've only had 2 today.
Okay.
And it's not super late into the day, so I think that's it. Well, did that make it worse?
I don't know.
It's not super late into the day, so I've already had 2. Okay, well, anyway, I've moved around the chairs, the tables.
It's impressive.
Promotional stand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I apologize for not informing you first, but I was just really on a whole thing. And then people started coming in, and I had to help them to their seats.
Yeah.
Get
All
concessions.
right, well, that's fine. It's still familiar enough. I was able to figure it out.
Yeah, right. And I mean, Leia, I feel like I did a pretty good job.
You did.
Making a maze. So everyone's in their seats. I think I did bring everyone their concessions.
Hopefully no one needs to use the bathroom. Did you offer them buckets too?
I should have. I still have some of those brain dead bags left over, so maybe those will be good use. They did seem fairly pleased. Some thought it was obnoxious, and I'm sorry to those people.
You can't be everyone's cup of tea, Brennan.
No, I can't, and I'm certainly not. But can I read out 2 little comments we've gotten on the show?
Yeah, please do.
So on Spotify, from Melancholy Ghost.
Hello.
Hello, Melancholy Ghost. They wrote, great show filled with amazing information. Perfect for those who enjoy movies on a deeper level.
Aww.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah,
I like
thank you.
And then on Apple Podcasts, from At End of Time Travel, they wrote, love this pod. Good fun facts about the movie they're breaking down. I'm not a bot. I know this review sounds like a bot wrote it, but I'm really just tired, which I love.
I laughed so hard when you read that one to me.
I gotta say I love that comment. So
I'm really just tired.
I just want to invite everybody, go ahead and leave us comments. Tell us how tired you are.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Could you find one that makes me laugh more?
Yeah.
I don't think you could.
Make us laugh. Just please don't get rude or offensive. We don't really want that. But make us laugh. Say something silly and goofy off the wall. I mean, I don't even care if it's about the show or not.
No.
If you're leaving a review and it's going to entertain us.
Tell me about your puppy.
Yeah, puppies. Yeah, of course.
Tell me about your kitty.
Yeah, that'd be great. Everyone seems settled, so let's maybe just get on with the show.
All right, sounds good.
I do have a copy of the novelization here. You and I can share.
All right, so, follow along.
Yeah, so let's all kind of crack open our books of the movie we're talking about today, which is...
Labyrinth.
What do they mean, labyrinth? There aren't any turns or corners or anything. This just goes on and on.
Labyrinth, a fantasy adventure released in 1986. Once upon a time, there was a girl named Sarah. Sarah loved imagination and valued her time living in grand fantasy worlds more than anything. On this particular afternoon, the sky was stormy, but always delighting in drama. It was the perfect setting for practicing lines from a play. A play titled The Labyrinth, about a girl who traveled
through dangers untold and hardships unnumbered. I have fought my way to this castle, beyond the Goblin City, to take back the child that you have stolen.
As she struggles to recall the final line.
You have no power over me.
Thunder strikes and the hour bells toll 7 o'clock, causing Sarah and her trusty puppy Merlin to quickly head home. Once at home, the whimsical girl is accosted by her wicked stepmother, who chides her for being late and ignoring responsibility. Sarah takes offense, feeling her caretaker is being insensitive to her timeline and her priorities. Father enters the picture now, holding an infant in an adorable red and white striped jumper, Toby, her younger brother. As the elder man expresses worry for Sarah's tardiness, and the wee Toby coos, Sarah, feeling quite oppressed, in disbelief bemoans the crushing concern.
I can't do anything right, can I?
And runs off in an exasperated huff to her only sanctuary, her bedroom. Sarah, ever put upon, throws herself in her area of seclusion and peace, only to find that peace disrupted as her favorite stuffed bear Lancelot is missing. In a rage, Sarah shouts,
Someone was in my room again! I hate that!
And bursts into her tiny brother Toby's nursery. Here, she finds the errant Ursine thrown onto the floor just outside Toby's crib as the infant whines and cries. Calling to the Fey realm, she shouts out,
"Someone save me! Someone take me away from this awful place!"
Thunder rolls again, and Toby kicks up his crying. In response, Sarah begins telling a tale of the labyrinth. A girl who lives in servitude by her parents wishes to have her young sibling taken away by the goblins. Before she can finish the tale, Toby's crying becomes too great, and Sarah picks up the child to console him, though the child will not relent in his wild wailing. Further exacerbating her incensed attitude, Sarah now calls out to the goblins, just as the girl in the story had done,
"I wish goblins would come and take you away right now."
With no apparent way to appease the appalled child, she lies him down, turns out the light, and stomps into the hall, when suddenly there's silence. Toby has ceased his continuous crying, and Sarah is struck with concerned confusion. Panic begins to creep over Sarah as she re-enters Toby's room and finds the lights will not turn on. Lit by the moon and the occasional lightning flash, the nursery is unsettlingly quiet. In between thunderous stormy booms, and Sarah calling for Toby, the slight murmurs and chilling chuckles of mischief can be heard within the room. Tearing back the little tot's blankets, Sarah finds Toby missing! Shock and disbelief flood the muddled Sarah as cackles echo around the room. Sporadic, erratic movements splash in chaos around the room, just in her periphery, and an owl flutters up against the window. As the sensory overload hits its peak, the window doors fly open and the owl soars through them. Sarah protects her face, covering herself with her arms. As she brings her defensive appendages down, she notices a strange, imposing figure standing before her. Clad in a black breastplate and flowing adornments, hair fluffed to perfection, and eyeshadow on point, Sarah takes this occurrence quite well, actually. She questions the presence.
"You're him, aren't you? You're the Goblin King. I want my brother back. Please. If it's all the same."
And the looming figure slyly responds,
"What's said is said."
Sarah pleads for her brother back, and the Goblin King points into the distance. Through the bedroom window, the world we know is gone. Replacing the stormy skies and suburban sprawl is a vast, seemingly unending land of mazes, walls, dead ends, twists and turns, a labyrinth with a grand castle in the center.
"He's there, in my castle,"
the Goblin King informs her.
"Is that the castle, beyond the Goblin City?"
Sarah inquires.
"It doesn't look that far."
She insists with less confidence than she pretends to portray.
"You have 13 hours in which to solve the labyrinth before your baby brother becomes one of us forever."
As the Goblin King fades and disappears before her very eyes. Resolving to reach the royal acropolis and realizing her responsibilities to rescue her youngest relative, Sarah sets her sights on the sprawling sidewinds and double backs of the diabolically devious dungeon filled with perplexing puzzles, tricky traps, deceitful denizens, and maybe a few friendly fellows. Sarah's journey through fantasy has only just begun, but our place is here, in the world of fun facts and tantalizing tidbits, so we will catch up with her later, after our chat. All right. So Leia, we've almost begun wandering through the labyrinth, and I think it's best left to her, to Sarah, to figure out the whole deal there. We've done enough here in the lobby, thanks to my mischief.
Your incredible enthusiasm.
And ingenuity.
Your ingenuity. Caffeine high.
Now that the damage is done here, let's put a Band-Aid over all that with talking about this movie, right?
Yeah.
We usually start covering the cast and crew, and I see no reason to deviate at this point.
No.
Who are we going to talk about first?
So I think we should start with Jim Henson.
Oh,
the
okay.
director.
Fantastic, yes.
And overall creator of this movie. He's the director, but he's also this genius puppeteer.
Well, you're right. Jim Henson, he had a huge imagination. He always kept his family involved. He had an absolute love for entertaining children. I mean, that seemed to be his life's passion.
Mm-hmm.
But he got his start in puppetry in TV way back in 1955. So he's been doing puppetry for a long time. The kind of odd little thing is, though, his first Oscar nomination came from a piece he made that involved no puppets whatsoever.
What was that?
A little live-action short called Timepiece. It was back in 1995. It was just a short little kind of surrealist experiment that he did, and it got him the Oscar nomination for the best live-action short that year. Yeah, I thought that was strange. You would have thought Jim Henson
would be really well known for his puppetery.
And
he'd
get
have gotten
an Oscar
nominations for that. Yeah.
But no, it was for this one live-action short.
Well, I mean, I think most of us are more familiar with his puppetry.
Absolutely.
He's especially known for creating the series Fraggle Rock that ran from 83 to 87. And actually, it was still really popular when he stopped the show.
It really was.
A lot of people thought it was strange, but he decided he was just done. He also did The Dark Crystal, and then, of course, Labyrinth after that. Interestingly, The Dark Crystal took 5 years to create. He and Terry Jones, actually, they're preparing to do The Labyrinth. Both of them were wary.
Kind of over it.
Of doing that because of how long The Dark Crystal took.
Sure.
But in retrospect now, I mean, The Labyrinth took 3 years to create. So it was a lot shorter. And clearly they had figured out that they're streamlining their process.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as long of a process this second time around.
Well, and Leia, of course, you mentioned Fraggle Rock, but obviously there's also Sesame Street and...
What's Sesame Street?
You may have missed it. It's a little children's educational program, really obscure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you ask 10 people, you're probably lucky to get maybe 1 or 2 that know what it is.
Yeah,
I feel rather
sure.
privileged to know.
Okay.
I
was kidding.
Yeah. And of course, the Muppet Babies animated series. We can't forget that one and leave that one out. With much more we could say on Jim Henson, I'd say it's likely we'll cover him again. So let's move on to another.
I do want to mention quickly that one of the producers, the executive producer, was actually George Lucas. George Lucas actually had been quoted as saying that he didn't want to do any interviews as to, quote, not steal Jim Henson's thunder. I guess George Lucas and Jim Henson were super besties all the way up until the time of Jim's death. They were super good friends. So you don't usually think of George Lucas involved in this because he didn't really want his name to be out there.
Yeah. And honestly, most people probably wouldn't even know he had a hand in it.
No. I thought that was sweet. We can move on to the writers then to, of course, Jim Henson's one of the writers.
Of course.
But also his good friend Terry Jones.
Right.
And he actually has the sole screenwriting credit, even though there were several other people involved in the process. Yeah. Yes, lots of other people, which there's Dennis Lee, there's Elaine May. Elaine May is actually the one she was the script doctor. And she was the one who delivered the final draft on April 11th, 1985. 4 days before the start of the film.
That is a crazy late submission.
So, I mean, there's a lot of people involved in this, but Terry Jones, he's also a member of Monty Python.
Yeah.
So I think that's where all the humor kind of comes from, is from that.
Well,
he's the brainchild of the humor involved in the film.
Yeah, him and Henson each of them wanted the feel of the movie to go in different directions.
Absolutely, yeah.
Terry Jones actually wanted it to be very much darker.
Oh, okay.
And Henson wanted it to be more humorous. When Terry Jones had given up his treatment of the script, and that went through so many different hands, he did, of course, inject humor into the story. But then by the time it got back to Henson again, Henson was realizing, hey, there's no humor.
It's lost a lot of the humor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the stars, David Bowie, was rather upset with the lack of humor as well. He wanted humor there, and he threatened to drop out of the project without the humor.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Henson went back to Terry Jones. He's like, hey, can you please...
You need to humor this back up again, please.
Can you please put a few yucks back in there? As much as Terry Jones didn't want to humor it up again, he certainly did.
Well, he had realized that it had been rewritten so far from where it was before that he couldn't even really bring it back to the way it was.
Yeah, it was a very different story from what he had initially conceived.
Jones had actually said that his biggest problem with the final draft was that the center of the labyrinth was shown before Sarah even got there, which I thought was interesting. He didn't want people to see the center of the labyrinth before she got there.
He wanted it to be a grand reveal.
A grand reveal. Yeah, so that was actually his biggest irritation with that. Yeah,
and in fact, we see the center of the labyrinth really quite early.
Very early.
Through the windows of that bedroom.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mentioned Dennis Lee. He had a hand in it. Well, he is one of the ones that rewrote it entirely. Yeah, he's helped rewrite it entirely.
He was actually responsible, too, for the first novella, which Jones then adapted into a screen treatment.
He is actually originally a composer rather than a writer.
Oh, really?
Which I thought was interesting.
What did he do any composing work that we'd know of?
So he composed Fraggle Rock.
Oh, okay. So
he works with him.
Yeah,
Jim
familiar
Henson.
working with Henson. Absolutely.
Yeah. This time he decided to put his writing cap on instead of his music cap on. Composer cap?
I like composer cap.
Yeah, okay.
I love the idea of just putting on different hats.
Yeah, and
Like
just calling them what they are.
Wearing different hats, do different superpowers, or Kirby eating different... I would love to eat different things and get different superpowers. That'd be so
Like One
great.
Piece.
Like One Piece,
But
yeah.
you can only eat one.
Well, in Kirby, you can just spit it out and get a new power.
Yeah, there you go. That'd be awesome.
Great. Anyway, sidetrack.
So I just wanted to quick mention Elaine May. There's a lot of men that we're talking about, and we don't talk about enough women.
They're exhausting, aren't they?
She's pretty awesome. I don't know if you've looked into her or not, but she's nominated twice for the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay.
Mm-hmm.
She played the elderly gallery owner Gladys Green in the revival play The Waverly Gallery in 2000.
Okay.
She won the 2019 Tony Award for Best Actress in that play.
Oh, good for her.
And at 87,
oh boy,
she is the second oldest winner of a Tony for acting.
Oh, heck yeah.
So I thought that was
Nice.
incredible.
That's super cool.
She seems like the type of woman who doesn't care how old she is. She's just going to
keeps on
doing
going,
what she's
man.
doing. Yeah. And I just love that. So yeah, anyways, that's all I have about the writers.
Okay. Can we boost up another woman that was associated in this movie?
I would love to.
All right, let's talk about Jennifer Connelly.
Jennifer Connelly, the star actor of this.
She is.
Next to David Bowie, she's the star.
She has all the screen time.
Most of the screen time, yeah. Her first feature film premiere was in the 1984 film Once Upon a Time in America. But in Labyrinth, she was only 14 years old when the film started.
So young, right?
Mm-hmm. And then she was 15 when the film was released.
Yeah, I had read that the actual filming part only took 5 months.
Mm.
So I'm certain by the time she would have been on set working, she may have been 14, and then when the film was released, 15.
She's also been in several other things that we're familiar with.
Lots of other things.
Dark City, Darren Aronofsky's Requiem for a Dream.
Right.
Blech.
Yeah. I adore that movie.
I don't adore it, but it's really good.
Yeah,
How's that sound?
You recognize it for being...
it's great.
It's just so
I don't want to
stressful.
see it. It's so stressful. She won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in A Beautiful Mind in 2001. She's been in The Hulk, Blood Diamond, Dark Water, Alita Battle Angel, Top Gun Maverick. She's also been in the TV shows Snowpiercer and Dark Matter.
Mm-hmm.
So she's been in a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's just a small list. Is there anything else that you would like to bring out, Jen?
You mentioned her kind of first film appearance, but
Mm-hmm.
her breakout role was in a film called Phenomena just before this as well. She also was in the animated movie 9.
Oh, okay.
So
got her animation
got
credit.
an animation credit there. And she did some voiceover work for the Spider-Man Homecoming movie, where she played the AI voice for Spider-Man's suit. It's sort of funny because Paul Bettany is her husband. Paul Bettany plays the Vision in the MCU, and the Vision, before he was fully the Vision, was the AI voice for Iron Man's
Oh,
suit.
really?
Yes. So it's a fun little
Interesting.
nod
All right.
to the deal there. The one other thing I need to mention, because I think it's definitely worth calling out, is that Jennifer Connelly, lives with ADHD.
Okay.
She's been on medication for treatment for it since she's been very young. Even with ADHD, she managed to attend school at Yale and then Stanford.
People with ADHD are really smart.
They're phenomenal people.
And if you can manage it well, you can go places.
Yes, sure can.
She's so beautiful, too. I think she was a model for a while as well. Oh, and she was like labeled, I think, one of the most beautiful people or something like that one year as well.
I got to say, when this movie came out as a child, I think this was the movie that sort of awakened me to, hey,
girls?
Girls and guys too, because David Bowie.
Yeah, well.
Looking pretty good too.
Bro.
The
pants in that one. Let me tell you what.
Right?
That leaves nothing to the imagination.
Nothing at all.
Can we talk about David Bowie?
I think we should.
I think we should just move
since
on
we
to
just
David
started
Bowie.
there.
Yeah. Really has no introduction needed. I mean, I think you'd be living under a rock if you didn't know who he was.
True.
But besides being a performer in stage and screen, he's also an accomplished mime, which I think is cool. And he's also amassed one of the largest collections of 20th century artwork.
Yeah, he was a big art
Yeah.
collector.
He's also the first artist to release a song available only on the internet.
Do you remember what song?
No.
No, I don't.
I did read what song it was, but I didn't write it down.
Right, that's all right.
But he was the first one to do that.
It's a notable achievement.
Labyrinth is actually the first movie that I remember him in. But he has like 18 acting credits before that on IMDb. So he had some acting credits before that. But that's the first one that as a
kid, we probably would have been privy to.
Yeah. I probably didn't even make the connection that he was David Bowie the singer.
Oh, right. No.
You know what I mean?
I'm sure some kids our age probably knew David Bowie from music, but maybe not his face necessarily.
Yeah.
The MTV was still only just a few years old at this point, and, not everybody had access to MTV. So he may have just been more prolific with people a little bit older than us. But one of his more famous movies before The Labyrinth that we probably wouldn't have seen at our age because we would have been 6 at the time this film came out. The Man Who Fell to Earth. Very famous movie.
He played Thomas Jerome Newton. So, I notice a lot of his characters are influential people. He also played Pontius Pilate in The Last Temptation of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Philip Jeffries in Twin Peaks, of course, because you got to bring the Twin Peaks.
Fire Walk with Me.
Yeah, you got to do that one. Played himself in Zoolander.
Of course he did.
He also played Tesla in The Prestige.
Yeah.
And of course, he's got an animation credit in Arthur and The Invisibles and SpongeBob SquarePants.
Can't forget the SpongeBob.
Can't forget SpongeBob.
Now that's fancy. You said he was in mime for a stretch. He learned his mimery. Is that
Sure, yeah.
Is that right? He studied as a mime under Lindsay Kemp, who was a protege of probably the most famous mime ever, Marcel Marceau.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And for the younger crowd, he's also a meme.
There's no doubt that
he's a meme.
David Bowie is the subject of many memes.
I'm pretty sure he's a meme
I would guarantee, yes. Leia, shall we move on from our cast and crew, or do you have
I have one more
All
I
right.
want to bring up.
Don't let me get too far ahead of us.
This is just a real quick one. I wanted to mention Toby.
Oh, sure.
Toby in the movie is actually Toby Froud, who's the son of Brian Froud, who is the conceptual designer for the movie. Toby's name actually was Freddie in the early drafts of the story, but then the baby's name was changed to Toby because he wouldn't react to the name Freddie. And this film was released on Toby's second birthday.
Which is so, literally on his birthday.
On his birthday.
Yeah.
That's so cute.
It is super cool. Never be able to forget that release day if I were him. I suppose I got ahead of both of us because I did also want to make a quick call out to Sherry Weiser, who was the one who was in the Hoggle suit.
Oh, I have some things to talk
about. And we can
about.
elaborate on that a bit more.
I have some things to talk about on that one.
But I did at least just want to mention her because she says to be able to do the acting she did in that suit, phenomenal.
Yeah.
Great job.
So let's move on to some of the acclaim for the film. According to the numbers, this film did 3.59 legs. I will say, I look at two sites. I look at the numbers, and I also look at Box Office Mojo for box office worldwide opening weekend. There's slight differences between the two websites, and usually there isn't. Usually they're exactly the same. But it was so slight that I just went, I think, with Box Office Mojo's numbers. I used the legs from the numbers, but domestic box office was 13,723,000. And then worldwide, the film did 14,665,000 grand total. But the production budget was 25 million, so
it came over the budget.
It just barely came over. It did so much better overseas. And in the years subsequent, my God, has this film gotten so much. It's a cult classic.
Yeah,
and I don't say that lightly. It really is.
That's all caps in every single letter of those words.
An opening weekend, it did 3.5 million. That's incredible because if it did 3.5 million opening weekend and their total domestic was 13.7, it must have just
tanked afterward.
Yeah. When I was a little girl, this was like a big fantasy favorite for me.
Well, and hell, I loved this movie, The Ends of the Earth, when I was a kid. Maybe it's the taglines weren't good enough.
Why? What's the taglines?
Honestly, I love the taglines. So there were a few I'm going to call out here. 3 extraordinary talents take you to a world of fantasy and adventure, the world of Labyrinth. So that, I assume, being Henson, Bowie, and Connelly, right?
Yeah.
Starring David Bowie, Jennifer Connelly, and numerous goblins and creatures. Okay, still kind of cheesy.
These taglines are not good.
The next two are pretty good.
Okay.
Where everything seems possible and nothing is as it seems.
Okay, I
Pretty
like that.
good,
That's
right?
cute. Yeah.
Kind of sums it up pretty well.
Sure.
Leia, this one's going to be my favorite. See if
Okay.
you can figure out why.
Oh, it's got a wordplay in it. I just know it. Just know it.
A amazing tale of never-ending fantasy.
Oh, God. Grown.
Woo!
All right. Well, I can see why you like that one.
It may have also been people were too busy listening to their radios because, Leia, I also found out, just because I thought it was fun, the #1 song in the U.S. when this film was released was On My Own by Patti LaBelle and Michael McDonald.
Okay.
In the UK, Wham was topping the charts with The Edge of Heaven / Where Did Your Heart Go?
People were distracted.
Maybe that was it. So, go ahead.
I was going to say that, did you have anything on the awards that this film?
It didn't win anything, but it did have a few nominations. Nothing at the Oscars for this one, but at BAFTA, it got nominated for Best Visual Effects, Saturn nominations for Best Fantasy Film and Best Costumes, and then a Hugo nomination for Best Dramatic Presentation.
Which, nominations are good.
It's still...
Because at least you've gotten recognized.
Yeah, it shows that you kind of rose above the pack and you have some worthwhile recognition. That being said, the reviews on it were kind of really mixed, just skewing slightly more positive than negative. Most reviewers had some pretty decent things to say about it, but boy, there were two notorious, notable exceptions. Two famous reviewers that hated this movie.
Siskel and Ebert?
Bingo.
Really?
On the nose. They hated
They did?
this movie.
I wonder if they've changed their minds over the years.
Yeah,
come on.
I hadn't ever looked back to see if they had ever decided to change their minds on it.
How can two people be the bane of a movie's existence so bad?
Yeah, I don't get it.
Like this movie was actually the final movie directed by Jim Henson because he felt like it was such a failure. He didn't want to do another movie again.
And he was so distraught by it.
You said
which
that
is too bad.
Brian, his son, Brian was 20 when he was working on this film with his dad, and he said it was one of the best times he ever had with his dad.
I can imagine.
After the Labyrinth's release, it was very difficult for Jim. However, this flop really didn't change the fact that this film is such a huge cult classic, and it really restored his faith in his work because it became a cult classic before he had passed away.
Yeah.
So he felt vindicated that this film actually was really good, and that makes me feel good because he really deserved that.
He did. It was a huge work, a big undertaking. There was so much of his puppetry talent poured into this movie.
Yeah.
For him to be able to see before he passed that it had such a huge cult following and that it left an indelible mark on pop culture in general. Even before he would have died, it would have been prolific in collectible scenes.
Yeah.
In art house movie scenes, in just cinema in general, it would have been recognized as a really fun, memorable movie.
So let's talk about some of the inspiration that was involved in creating this film, shall we?
Okay, let's do.
Jim Henson actually pulls a lot of his inspiration from the 1939 classic, The Wizard of Oz. Being only 3 years old at the time that it came out, clearly it wasn't like an immediate inspiration for him. It really fanned a spark in him once he saw that's kind of something he wanted to do himself, and he wanted to do stories like that. In the beginning, Sarah's room is littered with moments where you see things that are going to happen in the film. Brian Froud and Jim Henson weren't trying to make something original, but something that was very familiar,
like an amalgamation almost.
Yeah, so they didn't want it to be something that was just like out of the box. They wanted it to be, you watch it and you're like, oh, this feels like something I've seen before. Or they also wanted you to feel like, is this in Sarah's head? Is this real? So of course, aside from The Wizard of Oz, they also pulled a lot of aspects from Alice in Wonderland because, they wanted to, give you the sense, is this in their head or is this something that's really happening or, what's going on here? Even more specifically, some of the set design and characters were created specifically as a callback to Alice in Wonderland. For example, the guards that ask her riddles were all shaped like playing cards.
Right, yeah.
So he specifically drew a lot of those concepts from those movies.
Yeah, there was a top and bottom head.
Absolutely.
Each of them.
Just like on
a playing card.
Yeah. The labyrinth itself was actually also part of the inspiration. It came from the Greek myth of Theseus and the Minotaur. Jim had said, quote, "Traditionally the labyrinth is thought of as a voyage through life. The journey through life and the ultimate center is death, and rebirth is coming back out again. He also said that after all, life is kind of like a labyrinth. With all of its twists and turns, it's straight paths and occasional dead ends. And I thought that was really quite
Profound.
Yeah. She went through all of this. She went through the labyrinth, and she came out a different person. Very
From
different
where
person.
she went in.
Yeah. And she faced near death. She faced, all these different challenges. So I thought that was a nice little...
It pulled the theme together really very well.
The initial idea for the film actually came out of a limo ride that Jim and Brian shared after the showing of The Dark Crystal. And it was really quiet in there. And I guess out of nowhere, Jim just started laughing and he said, the next one will be so much better. I guess Jim's daughter at the time was studying mythology and he was thinking about doing something with mythological creatures. She often told her father folk tales from the things she was learning in class. So he got really kind of involved in that.
Yeah, sparked his imagination.
Really sparked his imagination. But Brian's more of a goblin guy. That's his specialty. So they decided to focus on a story about goblins stealing a child. But that's not to say that Jim didn't go on to do mythologically inspired content because, as you know, he went on to do the series The Storyteller, more mythology and storytelling, folktelling.
Yeah, I used to love that show.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really imaginative, fun series.
Yeah. Did you have anything else about inspiration for the film?
I just wanted to say that the things that this has inspired, this film has gained such a cult following. I mean, if anyone wants more Labyrinth world, more Labyrinth lore, more character interaction, even a bit more story, there's prequel and sequel comic books that have been made. There's board games, there's video games, companion books.
So there's even the board game we play, Zombicide. They have little minis for
Yeah, they
Jareth.
have a little Jareth inspired.
You can't really use it because they didn't have the rights to use. Exactly.
A little Jareth inspired.
David Bowie as a Jareth.
Basically, yes. But there's a very notable companion book called The Goblin Companion. The Goblin Companion was written by Brian Froud and Terry Jones, and it's a compilation, basically, of not every goblin, I'm sure, but many of the goblins that showed up in the film.
I think most notably the Junk Lady is in there.
Oh, right.
Did you know her name is Agnes?
Is it really?
Yeah, that's what her name is.
Aww.
That's from the book. She just cares about all her stuff. We all have that segment, the in with the new, out with the old, and it's not in every episode, but I do have a little call out for this one.
Pops in here? Okay.
A little
what
one.
You got?
The first computer animation was actually in 1958 in the film Vertigo, but Labyrinth is the first feature film to use photorealistic CGI animal characters.
Okay.
So the owl at the beginning is the very first photorealistic CGI animal ever put on film.
It spawned a whole lot more cinema techniques for good or bad.
It's a stepping stone, if anything.
I still will always prefer the practical effects, but CGI has its place.
It has its place. That one, it's so cheesy now, it's nostalgic.
Yeah, it is.
You look at it and you're like, oh, it's so terrible. I love it.
That's what started it all.
Right? So that's all I have for in with the new, out with the old.
Well, I guess in that case, let's just start running through some fun little stuff about this movie.
Tidbits, baby.
I'm going to start with this one just because it really is apropos to a whole lot of nothing else in the movie. So I've always heard, since I was young even, there was a rumor that Yoda had a cameo in this movie. About the 1 hour, 19 minute-ish timestamp on the film, Sarah and her friends are walking into the Goblin Town, the Goblin City. There's a window on the left-hand side of the screen that's open, and as Ludo walks past the window, it closes, and you can see very quickly a round face with some long ears. Not really enough detail to tell, though.
Is that just like people wanting to see it?
I think that's more what it is. I mean, it is a Henson puppet, and Yoda was a Henson creation.
And George Lucas produced this.
So, I mean, it's possible.
Absolutely, it's possible.
But there's
not enough.
There's no interviews that mention it. There's no special effects people that speak on it. No puppeteers that mention it. The Henson never mentions it.
If it's an Easter egg, it's a buried Easter egg.
Yeah, if it's Easter egg, it's just completely not acknowledged. So I would say something more akin to coincidence and people
wanting to see what they want to see.
Yeah, exactly right. It would be a great coincidence that Yoda just had a little vacation, or maybe this is his summer home. Who knows? Would have been awesome, but no confirmation on that one.
So you're talking about Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who Kenny Baker is?
Kenny Baker, was he the guy who played R2-D2?
He is,
Yes.
yeah. He was actually also in this movie. He played the goblin that's firing the cannon in the goblin fight scene where it like explodes and there's fire everywhere. So it didn't fire properly. And in real life, it actually caused his clothes to catch fire.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
He almost became a toasty critter on this movie.
Oh, that's phenomenal. I had no idea Kenny Baker was in this movie. That's great.
So there's your other Star Wars tidbit that
keep
connects.
on bringing it back.
See, I connected it. You're welcome.
I don't have an NCIS Law and Order.
I don't either.
Whatever the hell else
I have a Star Wars one.
So we're substituting today's episode with Star Wars.
We've had some Star Wars connections before.
We have in the past. Yeah,
Goonies had a Star Wars connection.
Yeah, that's very true.
Let's talk about Hoggle for a moment, because we had mentioned Sherry Weiser. She was the actor that was inside the suit. And then Brian Henson was actually the voice for Hoggle.
Right.
And Brian Henson's voice for Hoggle was actually not supposed to stay as Hoggle's voice.
Yeah, he's just sort of the off-screen place filler for the lines.
He was, yeah. And Jim actually ended up liking it so much that he kept it all in there.
The voice is so fitting.
It's perfect. It works so well. And I don't know why you would change that. And that's probably what Jim thought too. He's like, why would we change it? It sounds amazing.
Right.
Hoggle's costume had a camera on its chest, but it was eventually removed. I think it was clunky or something, so they removed it. But it also meant that Sherry Weiser could not see unless Hoggle's mouth was open. She had no other way to see what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So Brian Henson actually had the genius idea of writing loud grunts and scoffs into Hoggle's character just to give him a reason to keep his mouth open. And I thought that's genius.
Yeah, you'll notice a lot in the movie, if Hoggle is not saying anything, he's generally standing still. There's a lot of times where he'll be walking, and that walking movement will happen while he's talking and talking almost the whole time.
I'm sure that's because of that reason.
That absolutely makes sense.
Hoggle's suit had 4 puppeteers led by Brian Henson. They controlled 18 motors inside the face. Manipulating a mechanical mitt on his right hand, Henson controlled Hoggle's jaw movements and provided the voice. Another puppeteer provided further lip movements with another mitt. And then a third puppeteer used a fingertip joystick lever to control Hoggle's eyes and eyelids. And then a fourth used a similar mechanism to animate the eyebrows and a foot pedal to control the skin around Hoggle's eyes.
It's incredible how many people were participating to bring just that face to life.
Just to bring his face to life. And these puppeteers had to rehearse together for weeks so that they could help to anticipate each other's movements.
That is insane. So cool, though.
I think it's so cool that they had, you watch it and you're like, wow, it's so it looks so good.
It looks smooth.
It looks so smooth. They worked on that for weeks and weeks.
That's incredible. Congratulations to them. That was a wonderful work.
Amazing. There is also a Hoggle puppet on display at the entrance of the Scottsboro, Alabama airport.
That's an odd place to put one.
The reason being is because apparently one of the Hoggle puppets got lost on an airplane.
Oh, no.
and it eventually turned up at the unclaimed baggage area at the Scottsboro, Alabama. Now, it was in such bad shape.
Right.
They decided they didn't want it back.
Oh.
So it got restored, and they placed it along with all the belongings that it came with on display at the airport's entrance, and it's still there today.
That's a cool little memorial.
Yeah, so if you want to see a original Hoggle puppet, you can fly through Scottsboro. I kind of want to do that.
We'll take a little stopover.
Yeah, right? It's like a little mini museum.
Yeah, I think I would really like to see a sequel to Snakes on a Plane, like a spin-off.
Yeah.
Hoggle's on a Plane.
Hoggle's on a Plane.
Uh-huh.
That's not as scary, though. Although I'm not scared of snakes either, so.
That's true.
I'd have had fun on that plane. Well, that's all I got on Hoggle's puppet. But also Ludo's puppet had a miniature camera in it as well.
And there were 2 actors that had taken turns wearing the Ludo suit.
Yep.
Because there was, 75 pounds, I think I
it originally weighed over 100 pounds.
Right.
And Jim Henson told the creature shop to start all over again because he needed to make it lighter.
Heavy.
So they brought it down to just over 75 pounds, which was still too heavy for one person to operate at all times. So puppeteers Ron Muick and Rob Mills split the performance between the 2 of them.
They got the similar height, similar body shape.
That would be tiring.
I mean, just watching that movie, it looks heavy.
Yeah, Ludo's so lackadaisical and slow. I wonder if that was on purpose.
It may have been.
They probably felt just that.
There was no fast moving in that outfit.
No.
Speaking of concealed performances. Let's go with that statement. The really cool crystal ball tricks.
Oh, yeah.
Throughout the film. Do you remember the name of the guy who had done those tricks?
It was Michael Mortian.
Motion, maybe? Something like that? Motion.
It's Moschen.
Motion. There was no computer animation.
And I thought he did it himself, being a mime. I thought maybe he had done all that
David
himself.
Bowie maybe had done it,
Yeah.
But no, it was Michael Motion who, how did he do that? How did he pull that off?
So you know that funny thing people do where they put their hands behind somebody and feed them food or put makeup on them?
You put your arms in on your hips almost, and then people put their arms behind you through
and do things to make it look like you're
it looks like you're
hands.
Stupid.
Well, they didn't want that to be the case, so they had to work really hard to make you not look stupid in this one. He put his little hands through David Bowie's arms and did all of the crystal ball actions without being able to see any of it.
No monitor, no way to look from behind Bowie. That's astounding. Those are some cool-ass tricks. I always wished I could do those tricks so bad when I was a kid. I admit that I tried.
Didn't work out so well.
Nothing worked out.
No.
Nothing. I just continually dropped every damn ball that I was holding.
Nothing worked out.
If people know me, I'm not particularly sports inclined.
Well, you tried.
I pigeonholed into the nerd lifestyle forever, just by nature of my being. I was never going to replicate that.
So I think David Bowie is part of a couple tricks because he also was part of another little trick. There's a scene where Toby's sitting on Jareth's lap and he's surrounded by all the goblins. And Toby was upset and he wouldn't stop crying. And they were trying to get a way to get him to
settle down.
And to stare off in the distance and look content. So David put on this little glove puppet named Sooty.
Oh.
And I don't know if anybody knows who Sooty is. Sooty's kind of old, but Sooty's a little doggy hand puppet. And it came in yellow and orange, but they're from 50s or something like that. They're older. But he put a little Sooty hand puppet on and he put it out in front of Toby just off the camera.
To keep his attention.
To keep his attention while he had him on his lap and he was talking to him. And now when I watch the film, that's all I can think of. He's got this little puppet on his hand while he's sitting there and you can't see it.
It's one of the few scenes in the film where Toby was not meant to be crying.
Yes.
And he just wouldn't stop crying, so they had to find a trick.
And so the other scenes where he was crying.
Right, the magic dance.
The magic dance. He was actually really happy. He was laughing and he was loving it. You're watching him cry because they made him stay up past his nap
time.
Past his nap time so that he'd cry. I remember watching it going, somebody pick that child up, that poor baby. He's terrified. No, he's not terrified.
He's not terrified. He just wants to friggin' nap.
He wanted a nap.
The juxtaposition of those two stories I thought was classic.
Yeah. Jim Henson said that he feels that the hardest things to work with are animals, children, and puppets.
And what did this movie have, Leia?
Animals, children, and puppets.
Oh, my God.
He said this was a very frustrating film for him.
Yeah.
And it was very time-consuming and very difficult because of the three aspects that he had to work with.
Even Jennifer Connelly and David Bowie had both on multiple occasions said it was difficult at them, especially at first.
Yeah.
Getting used to the fact that they primarily, with very little exception, interacted with just puppets the whole time.
Yeah, there's people inside the puppets, but...
So you'd be hearing voices of the thing that you're interacting with come from off stage, somewhere else, maybe behind you or off to the side, but certainly not in front of you. So it was just hard for them to get in the headspace. By the end, they both had said it almost became second nature.
By the end, they were crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
They were talking to nobody.
I'm a madman and you're all my puppets.
You just get used to talking like you're crazy. David Bowie actually did the gurgling for the baby in the song Magic Dance.
Oh, right, yeah.
The goos and the gurgling sounds. He did those.
Yeah. David Bowie actually wrote and performed all of the songs. So Chilly Down, although he didn't perform Chilly Down, but he wrote it.
I love that song. As
the World Falls Down, Within You, Underground, and the Magic Dance. He wrote and performed all of those.
Did he write all of them?
He did, yeah.
Oh, I thought somebody else wrote some of those.
He had co-written.
Okay. Maybe that's what I was reading. The Remind You of the Babe is actually from another film. You remind me of the Babe. What Babe?
The Babe
with the Power. Yep. That comes from the film The Bachelor and the Bobby Soxer from 1947 with Cary Grant and Shirley Temple. Mm-hmm. But the words were actually, you remind me of a man.
What
man? The man with the power.
What power?
The power of hoodoo.
Hoodoo?
You do.
Do what?
Remind me of the man.
Right.
And of course, man is replaced with babe and hoodoo is replaced with voodoo. So that actually came from another film.
I'm sure David Bowie had very likely seen that film in the past and decided, hey, that was a cool little rhythm. Let's put it in this film.
Yeah.
I wonder if David Bowie in his normal everyday life, how people latch on to movie quotes.
Yeah.
And they say it with their friends all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? I wonder if he had seen that film and, maybe amongst his group of friends, that was a common refrain to do, hey, you remind me of the man. What man? I wonder if that was a thing they had done.
Maybe. When I heard it as a child, my dad and I actually latched onto that. And growing up, he did that with me all the time. Even up into my teens, he would say, you remind me of the babe. And then, of course, I'd have to finish it. And it would just keep going on and on and on because it's like circular.
It's so friggin' catchy.
It is. It was perfect for this film,
it really
honestly.
was.
The dance magic scene actually consisted of over 48 puppets.
So many puppets, man.
52 puppeteers. And 8 people in goblin costumes.
That reminds me of the Batman Returns set where it was so many friggin' penguins.
All
everywhere.
the penguin costumes.
And then a few people
the
in penguin costumes,
and the real penguins.
Right.
And I'm sure that one was tricky to work with, too. Because lots of animals and puppets. No
Not
kids,
so many children.
Though.
Except for when they're kidnapping all the children.
They had kids there, too.
Yeah.
We had spoken previously about some of the inspiration for the film, and some of that was in Sarah's bedroom.
Oh, yeah. Lots of stuff.
Where they brought stuff into her room to give you a sneak peek into what's going to be in the film later.
Yeah, almost everything that you can find
just
in the
about
film,
everything.
just peppered in there.
I've got a little list here of some of the things that you can see in the bedroom.
I've got some as well.
It's not a spoiler territory, is it?
Maybe some things, but let's do this because a lot of other things that I'd like to talk about are sort of spoiler territory-ish anyway. So let's just go into there for anybody who doesn't want to hear about some of the, or references to some of the fun encounters that the grand fantasy that is that land. If you don't want to be privy to that information right now.
If you haven't seen this movie already, fucking go watch it, man.
You really should.
Go watch it.
I mean, there are new people born every day. So there's obviously some people that, regardless of their intent, simply have not been exposed to this film, and I get it. So anybody who doesn't want to be privy to that, step on out. Watch this movie. Come on back. Finish up the rest with us and have this fun.
Someone save me. Someone take me away from this awful place.
Let's go.
Here we go.
There is a stuffed animal. The very first thing you see is a stuffed animal. It looks like Sir Didymus on her dresser.
Please, Sir Didymus, for my sake, hush.
But of course, for thee, anything.
There's a doll that looks like Ludo on the shelf next to her door. And even pans across her desk, and you can see the book Where the Wild Things Are.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fiery doll.
Yep.
Those little fireys are the Chili Down
pulling
song.
their heads off of each other.
Yep. Yeah, oh my gosh, so traumatizing. There's a fiery doll on the shelf next to her bed. There's bookends with goblins that sort of look like Hoggle on her dresser.
Yep, one of them looks very much like Hoggle.
Very much like Hoggle.
Horrible.
No, I ain't. I'm Hoggle.
After the Hoggle bookend, it pans over to a scrapbook, which shows newspaper clippings of Sarah's famous actress mom with another man, David Bowie.
Right.
Then you also catch a figurine of Jareth on the right side of her desk.
Yep.
You're him, aren't you? You're the Goblin King.
And I remember when we were watching it, I was like, whoa, hey, look, there's Jareth right there.
Very apparent.
The dress Sarah's wearing in the ballroom scene is reminiscent of one that's being worn by the little miniature doll that's in her music box.
Yeah, that's spinning around.
That little spinning. I mean, we've all seen those.
Yep.
There's a wooden, and I remember seeing this one too, but there's a wooden maze game on her dresser next to her books.
One of those that you kind of use a knob to tilt it to get a ball through the maze.
Go through.
You have 13 hours in which to solve the labyrinth.
There's also a small painting on her wall that depicts a contraption much like the one operated by the cleaners from when Sarah and Hoggle had to escape.
Oh, I didn't see that. I'll have to look for that next time.
And last but not least, and I'm sure you may have something else, but there's a copy of the famous picture by M.C. Escher titled Relativity, which is used in the room where the final confrontation with Jareth occurs.
There's a few other things that I'll mention as well that I had kind of noticed as I was watching through. So not only was there a Wizard of Oz book, but there was also a Snow White book as well. In that scrapbook with Sarah's mother and David Bowie, you can see another picture of Disney's animated Robin Hood, which I thought was just a fun little throw in there. Next to the stuffy of Ludo on the shelf is I can't tell if it's a book about the game Ludo or if it is a box of the game Ludo. On another shelf, again, this one especially has nothing to do with anything. I just thought it was a cool pop fiction reference. There's a Judge Dredd board game.
Really?
On the shelf, yes.
Nuh-uh.
So I thought that was
in Sarah's room.
Yes.
She's awesome.
She's pretty awesome.
She's my spirit animal.
And I will say two other things. So one, her dog Merlin looks very reminiscent of Ambrosia.
Right. Ambrosia's? Forward.
Said that is direct connection.
Yeah, direct connection because Ambrosia is another name for Merlin from the Arthur legend. And the clock tower in the beginning that strikes 7 because it's pressuring her to get home under a time limit. After Sarah solves the labyrinth and gets back to her real world, an image, an overlay of that very same clock tower strikes. Again, showing that she had, a time limit to finish what she was doing. So 13 hours to solve the
Adult
labyrinth.
world sucks, man.
Right. So I just thought it was cool the way that those kind of real-world connections.
The connection that you had to Robin Hood, that's the Fox Robin Hood, the Disney one, right?
Yes.
Didymus is a fox.
That he is.
So maybe that's a little bit of a connection there too.
Maybe.
He's one of my favorite characters.
Oh, Didymus or Robin Hood or both?
But Didymus.
I love them both. But Didymus is so...
In this movie, he's one of my favorites. He's so cool.
So that kind of leans me into another little segment I wanted to cover in the spoilers here, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It's a whole theme of nothing is as it seems. I mean, obviously, it's even mentioned throughout the film that things in the labyrinth are not as they seem.
Things are not always what they seem in this place.
Speaking of Sir Didymus, he's small, he's tiny, he's lithe, but he is, without a doubt, the most fearless, courageous, the largest personality. He'll
just
boisterous.
walk right in.
I shall fight anyone, anywhere, any place, any time.
Even when backed into a corner and surrounded by goblins with spears, he shows no fear and in fact continues to simply taunt them. When they're facing down that giant door golem, he doesn't even pay attention to the golem. He doesn't give a damn.
Yeah.
He's trying to get Ambrosius to come out from behind a stack of...
Get out here.
You're embarrassing me.
You're embarrassing me.
So, again, nothing is as it seems there. Ludo, big, monstrous.
Yeah.
Right? Sarah first hears his bellowing and expects him to be this monster of a creature.
Yeah.
And she finds out he's this gentle, unassuming creature who's, got a little, not necessarily a cowardly streak, but he's rather timid, just the kindest creature. There's also, when she first enters the labyrinth, she sees a fairy flying around. And Hoggle, when she first meets Hoggle, he's there spraying them with a pesticide. She ends up touching one and they bite her. And she goes, oh,
bit me.
What did you expect fairies to do?
Again, nothing is as it seems. There's a point where Sarah expresses dismay at the labyrinth having no turns or openings or anything of that nature.
But there aren't any turns or any openings or anything. It just goes on and on.
And she sits beside a worm who strikes up a conversation, and he says,
So, you can't take anything for granted.
Certainly an opening right there across the way. And she's like, I don't see it. Where's the opening? He says, well, go walk through it and you'll see. And she does. And
same way she's putting the little marks on the ground. And the little animals are coming up underneath and moving the boards around.
The little tile people or whatever they are. Yeah. They flip them upside down or turn them the other way. And...
This place is impossible. Just got done watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy recently. And you were talking about Didymus and how he's so courageous and fearless. He reminds me a lot of Legolas, honestly.
Legolas, okay.
Yeah, where he just goes into things and no fear whatsoever, but he's like this small, he's not a fearsome looking creature, but he's a force to be reckoned with.
He is. He certainly is. Well, Leia, I've got a lot of themes that I found carried throughout this film. The choice of left or right in this film. Did you notice a theme over the choice of left and right? So she meets Hoggle just outside the labyrinth. He shows her how to get into the labyrinth. Just before Hoggle leaves her presence to leave her to do what she's doing, he says,
Now, would you go left or right?
Sarah ends up going right. And that's when she ends up frustrated that there's no end to this. There's no twist and turn to this maze, right? And then she meets the worm. The worm grants her the ability to see things with a different perspective and find her way further into the labyrinth. She begins going left, but the worm calls out to her.
I said, don't go that way. Never go that way.
And without questioning it, she goes right. And we find out after she had already disappeared down the hall.
If she'd have kept on going down that way, she'd have gone straight to that castle.
Again, that also sort of falls into the nothing is as it seems. She's taking that information for granted. And then, Leia, do you remember which door she chose when she was at the shield guards?
The right door.
She chose the right door, and directly after she chose that door, she fell into the pit of hands, which then landed her in the oubliette.
Oubliette.
Yes.
I had to look up what that was. I did not know what that was. I do now, and I will never forget it.
Do you want to give us a definition?
Oh, don't sound so smart. You don't even know what an oubliette is.
It's just a hole in the ground, where they kept prisoners.
Yeah.
And so there was no way to get out of it. So it was basically a place where you put people you want to forget about.
Yeah.
So you put them in this hole. It's like a pit. And then there's a tiny opening. It's
just
at the middle, at the top of the ceiling. And that's the only exit.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to get out
Yep.
of.
Unless someone opens it from the top, you're not getting out because it's so far up.
Yeah.
Most people just starved and died.
But now you know.
Now you know. French word. And then also one final time of choice of left and right, the knocker doors. So she chose the door on the right. Now, it's never revealed to us what was on the left side, but the original script treatment had a lighter forest and a dark forest. Well, in this instance, she's shown going through the dark forest. So we can only assume that perhaps the left door would have led to a lighter forest.
Right.
Choice of left and right.
Yeah.
Going right, this whole film got her into a whole bunch of trouble.
I should have mentioned this earlier, and I totally forgot. When you mentioned Robin Hood, I was like, God, I feel like I had a fact about that, and I couldn't remember what it was, but I just remembered what the fact was.
All right, please bring it.
It is way out there.
Okay,
So,
well, it's not the first time I've done that, so go ahead.
My apologies. But there's a Robin Hood connection. So Sarah has a scrapbook, and on the open page, it shows the Fox Robin Hood from Disney's Robin Hood from 1973. Actor Brian Bedford, who provided the voice of Robin Hood, he passed away on January 10th, 2016.
Oh, okay.
Alan Rickman, who played in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves from 1991.
Sheriff of Nottingham.
He passed away January 14th, 2016. And David Bowie passed away January 10th, 2016.
Okay, yeah. So that is a bit of a wild connection.
It's a wild, crazy, out there connection. And they didn't all pass away on January 10th, but two of them passed away on January 10th. It's like Robin Hood connection, and then it's like adjacency. Yeah, it's a weird connection.
It isn't a weird connection,
but I thought it was funny.
If we are nothing else here, we are a
weird connections,
podcast about weird trivia. It certainly fits in the show.
I thought that in the film, Jareth is falling in love with Sarah.
Yeah.
And I
seems really weird.
I thought it was weird at first, but I actually heard a theory about it, and the theory kind of made me feel less weird about the love interest.
Right.
Someone considered Jareth's attraction to Sarah to be reminiscent of the attraction of the fallen angels to mortal women, which is referred to in chapter 5 of Genesis. So it's not as much of a love like a romantic love, but more of like a
doting affection.
Yeah. And so when I read that, I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. I like that thought process better. And there's nothing to say that isn't maybe possibly what was going through Jim Henson's mind when he did this anyways, because he was really into the mythology aspect of things. So, this film was filmed next to another movie that I love. So this film was filmed right next door to Legend from 1985. And if you don't know me, you're about to know me really well, because I was obsessed with unicorns when I was little. Obsessed. My whole bedroom was covered in unicorns.
Like Jareth level of obsessed.
Obsessed, yes. So that was one of my favorite films when I was a kid. And of course, I loved Labyrinth because it was, kind of in that realm of like mythology. It also meant that the cast and crew of both movies actually often intermingled. Brian Henson happened to meet and develop a crush on Mia Sara. Mia Sara was in Legend, and they met years later. They met again, and they got married.
Aww.
And they're still married today.
It's a love connection.
I love that.
That is super cool.
I really like Mia Sara, and Brian Henson seems like a really interesting guy.
Interesting for sure. Talented.
Good for them.
Well, I've got one more little theme to present, and then I'm pretty well out of stuff to say.
All right, I got a couple other things after that.
You say caked out.
I know, right? I knew
exactly what I was doing.
You're going to bring that up, aren't you?
All right. Do you want to share this one?
No, go ahead. I don't want to take your thunder.
There's a number of times that the cake, it's a piece of cake.
It's a piece of cake.
Is mentioned in this film. So
never a good thing.
Never a good thing.
In this film.
So just like going right, saying it's a piece of cake is going to lead you into trouble. And in fact, there's a few times where they're combined. So Sarah walks through the door with the shield guard, says, oh, it's a piece of cake, and then immediately falls into the hole, the pit of hands, which then lead her into the oubliette, right?
Okay.
So,
bad news.
Piece of cake. Bad news. Don't say it. The next time she says
we haven't made the connection yet, though.
No, it's still just a one time. With 1 point, you don't get a line.
Yeah.
So the next time she says it, she's talking with Jareth and Hoggle in the tunnel just before the cleaner. And as soon as Sarah comments about how the labyrinth has been a piece of cake, Jareth immediately brings up a vision of the clock and reduces the time that she has to navigate the labyrinth, and then throws his crystal ball down the hallway, unleashing the cleaner. So her and Hoggle then have to run to safety because of Jareth just disappears because he's got magic powers. Again, you said it, bad things happen.
Way to muck it up for yourself.
The third time, I think Sarah's probably learned her lesson, so it's not Sarah who says it.
But somebody says it and Sarah's like, God damn it.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening here because they're walking through the Goblin City, which has been their almost endpoint the whole journey. And they just finished dealing with that golem gate guard. And they're thinking, okay, if we can finally, we can walk through this town peacefully because it seemed rather abandoned. Hoggle has to open his mouth and say, oh, it's been a piece of cake. And then immediately, as soon as he finishes that final syllable, the crew are surrounded by a goblin ambush.
Of course.
Straight out of D&D. You got goblin archers up on rooftops. You got goblin spearmen blocking each pathway. It's a nightmare of epic proportions. So, if we learned anything, don't take things for granted. Nothing is as it seems.
And it's not a piece of cake.
Not a piece of cake, and don't turn right.
And don't turn right. This is what we've learned from this film.
This is what we've learned.
So that scene you had just mentioned with the hands,
mm-hmm.
That was actually, there was 100 pairs of latex hands that were used to make the, quote, helping hand scene.
Right.
In an interview with Jim Henson, he said, doing the shaft of hands in Labyrinth was an enormously impossible thing to pull off. It was really visually impossible, and because of that, I think the scene was extremely exciting for him to direct, talking about his father.
Sure.
Said, for my dad, it was much less about getting deep into the mind of the characters and delving deep with the actors, and it was much more the very unusual moments, unusual characters, doing scenes that were like nothing that had ever been done. That was what excited him most, and that was very detail-oriented, although not as detail-oriented as Frank Oz, who is the most detail-oriented.
Of course. Yeah, I've heard Frank Oz was a notorious detail.
They were quite a pair I've read.
Yeah.
So.
I wonder what it would look like to see all the puppeteers doing the hand movements from outside the perspective of that shaft. Because I just wonder how many people were stacked on top of each other.
And from what I understand, they had to, do that scene over and over and over again because they were doing faces with the hands. The way that the walls were created, they angled the boards just slightly so you couldn't see the people underneath, with the hands in the walls. There was a lot. Like you said, it was an impossible scene. And that was what I think excited Jim and challenged him most was, well, if it's impossible, I'm going to do it.
I think if there's anything Jim loved, it was a challenge.
It was a challenge. Yeah, absolutely. I do have some other spoiler content that's very brief.
Okay.
But it's really just things that they did not put in the movie that they took out. One of them was the junk lady. She was actually supposed to be revealed as Jareth's mother in the film. She would resurface at odd times in his conscience, apologizing for his bad behavior and likewise admonishing children never listen, even when they're told to pick up their toys or play fair or...
How very Norman Bates Psycho.
Right? Yeah.
Spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen Psycho.
In another version of the script, the junk lady was actually a puppet being manipulated by Jareth, and the junkyard was actually a town complete with a bar that Hoggle visits before they find Sarah.
Well, and that sort of reminds me. So the other thing that kind of goes back to nothing is as it seems. When Sarah is confronting the junk lady, Sarah finally snaps out of it and says, no, this is junk. This is all trash. And the world literally comes tumbling down. Mm-hmm. The set, the fake bedroom tumbles down, which I thought was cool because the scene that got her into the junkyard was that ballroom scene
where it all falls down.
The world falls down song was played. So I thought that was pretty cool. The one last thing I wanted to mention as far as nothing as it seems.
Yeah.
So the cleaner, it looks imposing from the front side. It looks completely dangerous. It's a bunch of rotating blades and steel and metal, and it's taking up the whole area. There's nowhere to run, right? When it passes on the backside, so when it's coming at you, you hear this rumbling.
It looks crazy.
Constant noise.
Yeah.
On the backside, it's as if the sound gets quieted. And it's just like 3 or 4 goblins on little bicycles
pedaling it down the street.
So the amount of times that they've used perspective in this movie was phenomenal.
MC Escher stuff is all about perspective as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even the labyrinth itself is all about perspective. The scene where Sarah, Hoggle, Sir Didymus, and Ludo enter the Goblin City. You see several roaming animals kind of scurrying about, one of which is a crawly, furry shellfish, the very same that's seen eaten by the Skeksis during the feast in the Dark Crystal.
Huh. I'll have to look again and see what that critter looks like.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize it.
Reused character. Perfect.
Yeah, great. You already spent so much money making those
Right.
puppets. You might as well use them again.
I just have 2 more little tidbits
All right.
I want to share.
Lay them on us.
The first one is some of the people that they had considered for some of the roles.
Oh, of course. Yeah, we
before.
touch on this every episode,
Yeah,
so we might as well keep
and
it going.
It's fun to think about what would be,
What could have
what
been.
this film could have been if somebody else had been involved. Michael Jackson, Prince, and Mick Jagger were all considered for the Goblin King.
It's interesting that they had chosen primarily pop music.
Probably wanted them to do the music for
Mhm.
it and stuff. Jim Henson actually preferred Sting,
Okay.
so Sting could have been also part of it.
Sure.
But his kids convinced him that David Bowie would be best suited for it. And Bowie was already wanting to do a children's movie, and he liked the concept of the script, so he agreed to play the part. Jim seemed to really listen to his kids, and I love that.
Took a lot of their counsel into advisement.
Helen Bonham Carter, Jane Krakowski, Yasmin Bleeth, Sarah Jessica Parker, Mary Stuart Matherson, Laura Dern, Maddie Corman, and then Carrie Green, Lily Taylor. Oh my gosh, there's so many.
There's a list.
Mia Sarah, Marissa Tomei, all auditioned for the role of Sarah. Krakowski, Sheedy, and Corman were all highly considered for the role, Ali Sheedy,
Mm-hmm.
alongside Jennifer Connelly, but she eventually won that role. So that could have been a different
Yeah, that's
Sarah,
That's
for sure.
quite the batch.
Yeah, quite the bad. There's so many names there.
Yeah.
I put them all in here. I didn't realize how many names I put in here. Oh my God. But I couldn't not mention this because you're a video game
Of course.
dude.
Yeah, I do
And-
love me some video games.
And you liked old video games.
And also true.
In 1986, 2 video games came out based on this movie, one in Japan and one in Western markets. Pack-In Video and Lucasfilms released the English language game Labyrinth, the computer game, in the West.
Mm-hmm.
And in Japan, Nintendo released a Japanese language game for the Famicom system called Labyrinth Maze of the Goblin King. Interestingly, both games follow the plot of the movie, and the player has 13 hours to solve the labyrinth and thwart Jarrett's plan, but the gameplay is completely different in both.
There's a little bit difference in the plot. In the American version, the main character is a person who goes into a theater, and very Last Action Hero style, Jareth shows up and sucks them into the movie.
Why does the Western ones always got to be so weird? Like, they did the
I
same
don't
thing
know.
with Goonies, too, where you're like, but why is there a little person in this one?
Cousin Pipsqueak, right?
Cousin Pipsqueak.
Yeah, Cousin Pipsqueak. And why was there a mermaid?
Why is there a mermaid?
Yeah. I don't know why it is. Back in the 80s and 90s, very often when a movie got adapted to a video game, it was awful.
Yeah.
Because it
You
wouldn't
played 'em
follow the
anyways, but-
Yeah, sometimes you did. It wouldn't follow the stories of any of the movies you had seen, and every player would end up disappointed. Because the developers, they believe you don't want to play the story that you had just seen on the movie. They're wrong. That's what everyone wants to do. Everyone wants to play that story. Whereas when it goes from translating a video game to a movie, which also ended up failing very historically a lot, it's because Hollywood doesn't think you want to see the story you had just played. Leia, once again, they're wrong. People who play those games want to see their story told live in a different medium. Maybe throw in a few differences here and there, but
Yeah.
give the people their damn stories and characters.
Right?
Stop altering them to the point we don't recognize them anymore.
Yeah.
Now, recasting, changing genders and ethnicities, that doesn't bother
That's
me.
fine.
That's fine. Just give me the friggin' story.
Yeah. we don't need it to be different.
Yes.
That's what we're looking forward to that.
Give the characters their same personality.
Mhm.
Give me the character personalization. Give
the
me the story.
Yeah.
Please.
Please. And there is Brennan's PSA for today.
God, Brandon's been ranting most episodes lately. I got to cut back. Pull me back, Leia.
All right. Well, that's all I got.
Okay. Leia, I'm feeling really inspired. I love this labyrinth setup I got going on here. I'm thinking maybe when we're done here, I'm going to expand outside of the lobby.
What?
Maybe not into the basement, because that's, our basement is special. But maybe I'm thinking of taking my little project into the streets. And I'm going to start a labyrinth kind of down the street a little bit. We don't live too far from here. I'm wondering
Brandon,
if I can make
I
a
wish the
labyrinth
goblins would
from
come and
here
take you
all
away
the way
right now.
home. And
Brennan? Oh, shit. All right. Well, I guess that means we will be ending this without Brandon, because I don't see him anywhere. I guess we can't keep the lobby open forever. We do have to move along, and that means you do too. But just because we close the lobby doors, it doesn't mean you have to ignore us. In fact, we insist you contact us and do so often. You can find out more about the lobby at the Movie Theater Lobby on Facebook and at the Movie Lobby on Instagram, Blue Sky, YouTube. You can also email us directly at themovietheaterlobby@gmail.com. You can find Brandon at BrandMC on Blue Sky. You can find me, LM Nerdroom, at all the previously mentioned socials. I'm on almost all of them. You can also go to our website, themovietheaterlobby.com, where you can connect with us directly. And as a final plea, please head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, or wherever you get your podcast to give us a glowing review. Don't forget to unsilence your cell phones, finish your snacks, and join us next week at the Movie Theater Lobby. Thank you, Brandon, wherever you are.
Thank you, Leia.
All right. And thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
The Movie Theater Lobby.
If that is the way it is done, then that is the way you must do it. But should you need us?
Yes. Should you need us?
I'll call. Thank you, all of you.